That's a weird way to finish it, because you said these are 10 reasons not to move to Australia, but everything that you've said is almost kind of convincing you to. Welcome back to another video with the Jalloh family. I don't understand why this person's made this video, but it's kind of prompted us to want to watch it and see what reasons they've found not to move to Australia. Because we absolutely love Australia. We will judge, but yeah. Comment down below if you agree with some of these reasons, or if you have any other reasons why you shouldn't move to Australia. Don't know why. We'll be interested to know.
G'day mates, how you going? Because today we're talking about the land down under, Australia. Is it a country? Is it a continent? Do kangaroos really just roam freely about? Sounds like fake news to me.
God, we're like 14 seconds into the video, and already
that always seems to come up.
I know, it's so weird.
Kangaroos hopping about everywhere. Yeah, they do.
Sixth largest country is a giant 3 million square mile island continent stuck between the Indian and Pacific Oceans. And this strange geographic location is what makes Australia such an ecological and biological anomaly with so much diverse nature and wildlife unique only to the country. From Tasmania to the stunning beaches to the outback rainforests and Great Barrier Reef, there is so much natural beauty to be found here. But Australia eventually gained independence in 1901, and since then, the land down under has become a country with one of the highest qualities of life, a great healthcare and education system, incredibly low crime, vibrant and welcoming residents, and an excellent economy with
no shade. I think there's some really interesting observations between the education system here and the education system in the UK.
Yeah.
Personally, I could only go on my two children. My two children thrived and did so much better in the UK, but I think that's because of the regimented high pressure environment and the very clear no BS approach. That works well for Saffron because she's very compliant, so I know the rules, I know what's expected, I will rise to the challenge. Our second born child, he's a savage. He's like me, he's the run of the liver. Wow.
And that too.
He's the run of the litter, but we live our best lives. I think that's a big claim. I haven't seen that. The education system here is better. I haven't seen that.
I looked at the education tables. Australia was like 6th or 8th or something like that. UK was 1st or 2nd.
But then one of the best in the world, if it's the 7th and they're saying the 10.
And that's it.
And you saw it from both sides, being in the education system, but then also being a teacher as well.
Yeah.
Excellent economy with hardly any poverty. Nonetheless, only 25.5 million people actually live here, and less than 100,000 of those are US expats.
Wait.
Sorry, can I say something else?
No, go for it.
Okay, the poverty one as well, I don't agree with. But with a caveat of, I probably have a bias because that's the communities that I work in. When it says hardly any poverty, they're probably looking at per capita. Compared to space, people, and then the number of people. That's not to say there's not poverty here, because there is poverty here, and there are people living on the breadline and living I was going to say foot and mouth. They're living hand to mouth.
I think one of the issues when watching these types of videos is we tend to think in the extremes. What I took from what he said was one of the. I don't look at it as there is none.
Okay.
I look at it as there is some, but compared to others, it's not as much.
There must be a reason only 1,000 to 4,000 new Americans immigrate here each year, right?
Well, maybe you'll find out in my top 10 reasons not to move to Australia. Number 10. It gets hot. Contrary to popular belief, most of Australia isn't all perfect year-round temperatures. Well, unless you're in Sydney or Perth, but even those get some bad days each year. And although a few cities on the southern coast and Tasmania actually get hit by really cold fronts coming up from Antarctica, the real issue in most of Australia is the heat. Heck, it gets so hot in the desert here that the opal miners back in the day ended up building an underground settlement called Cooper Pedy to protect them from the heat. It's pretty cool, actually. And I'd be remiss to not talk about that other thing the heat and sun cause as well. Bushfires. You've probably already heard about the wildfires that have decimated 46 million acres and killed 451 people this past year alone. But sadly, it's not the first, and it definitely won't be the last.
We had bushfires when we first moved here. 2019, we had bushfires, the hailstorm. COVID and then multiple lockdowns. And that was the experience of our first 2 years here. We got to Canberra in May. End of April, beginning of May, and then went into lockdown pretty much the end of that year. Bushfires the end of that year, then straight into lockdown.
One of the comments was saying the bushfires are part of the natural cycle of things. When the bush does burn, it does release some of the seeds, and when the rain comes, it then regrows everything. So I think they've become worse just because we're living closer and closer because we're building so much. So we tend to see it even more now as well.
Number 9. It's isolated. You might have wondered why so many Australians have left their beautiful homeland that seems a lot like paradise to most Americans. But the reality is that many Aussies feel trapped, lonely, and isolated from the rest of the world.
I feel like he's doing the most. He's got me tight already.
No.
It is far. I will give you that. It is far. When I went back to the UK in December, we got a couple of vlogs ago. Scroll back and have a look at some of those vlogs. It is far. But to say somebody feels isolated, I feel like that's a bit much.
No.
What are you isolated from? You build your friends and your community here. I think you'll feel isolated if you don't want to be here.
But then thinking about, you know, how big the country is and traveling to the different places is like going to different places anyway.
Different countries,
Different
absolutely.
countries.
And while you may think that's silly, since you can just hop on a plane and fly to a nearby country like Indonesia or Singapore, it
Bali.
actually isn't so simple. Most Australians live in the southeastern part of the country, so a flight to anywhere other than New Zealand means crossing the giant continent of Australia and then some, or just the entire Pacific Ocean. Basically, even those close countries end up being anywhere from a 6 to 10 hour flight away. It's at least a 14-hour flight if you're going to the US, and you should expect to spend over 24 hours in airplanes and airports if you want to visit anywhere in Europe. And before you comment,
So what if other countries are far away? Australia's huge. Just explore that.
well, the thing about that
That was
is
also
that
right at the
Australia isn't just isolated from other countries. The cities here are actually really isolated from each other.
But that sounds like somebody who maybe lives in the city and wants that city life.
Yeah.
If you lived in London or New York and you're trying to move to Canberra and recreate what you had there, but with all the benefits, then you are going to be disappointed.
You will be.
Because
Yes.
Canberra is a city, but for us from the UK, it's not really, to be honest. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Why would I live in London and then want to move to Canberra to recreate what I had in London? Why would I not just stay there?
Stay in London, yeah.
Like, it doesn't make, like, I don't understand that mindset of people of, oh, it's not like home, or, oh, of course it's not. It's the other side of the world. It's a completely different country, continent.
Yep.
It's different. Like,
Hence-
surely that's what you're looking for, no? Or
That's
would
what
you
I
not
was
stay
just
where
about
you
to
came
say.
from?
Hence why we moved. Is
Doesn't make
we
sense.
got tired of what London had to offer,
Yeah.
and you know, rather than complain about it, we made moves to find something different. And now we're here. People ask us all the time, "Would you ever go back?" For me, no.
He didn't even want to go back in December when I went back for a funeral. He said absolutely not.
But I might visit for family or visit.
Like if someone passes away, or like when Saffron has a baby, if she has a baby over there, like obviously big things like that.
From our conversations, we don't think that that's a reason not to move to Australia just because you feel like things feel isolated.
Has this person been here? Because I think before I moved here,
Yeah.
my perception was that most of the place, not all of it, but most of the place was like red dirt, basically.
Yeah.
And when you looked on like YouTube or anything like that, there was no, which is one of the reasons why we started doing vlogs and things like that, was because what does it look like? What do the trees look like? What do the roads look like? What's the architecture? You want to see what it looks like. And they show Sydney a lot, but they didn't really show like places like Canberra and things like that. So I wonder if this person hasn't even been here. So he's thinking by looking at the map,
That's what Australia
that's
is.
what Australia is.
Red dirt, kangaroos,
And Sydney Opera House.
Sydney Opera House.
centers are very spread out, and most of Australia is very remote. For example, the two closest big cities would be Sydney and Melbourne, but they're still an 8.5 hour drive apart.
See again, incorrect. I'm no geography teacher.
Yeah.
However, would the two closest cities not be Canberra and Sydney? Because Sydney's like a 2-hour drive. So why is he missing Canberra and going straight to
Adelaide to
Melbourne?
Darwin's a 31-hour drive, and Sydney to Perth is a 41-hour non-stop trek with pretty much nothing in between.
Wow.
Number
I wouldn't do
8,
that.
time zones. Speaking of isolation, Australia isn't just physically isolated from other countries. You're also going to have trouble keeping in touch with your family or friends back home unless they live somewhere in Asia. Australia is an entire
I'm
Pacific...
sorry. once again, I got a count off for everything. This is my last one. I'm gonna chill out.
Yeah. Oh, otherwise we're not gonna get through the video.
Yeah, this is my last one. Me and my child, we speak for 3 hours a day. Time zone is not a problem. If you want to, and me and my dad, we talk an hour, 2 hours. Sometimes you just need to be conscious of the time difference. There's a 3-hour window at the beginning of your day and the end of it.
You're also going to have trouble keeping in touch with your family or friends back home unless they live somewhere in Asia. Australia is an entire Pacific Ocean away from the US and 2 continents length away from Europe, so the time zones are practically exact opposites. Now, Australia has 3 main time zones, but for the sake of just showing how different the times are, when it's 7 a.m. in Sydney, it's 10 p.m. in London, and when it's 6 a.m. in Perth, it'd be 6 p.m. in New York. I get that this is just more of an inconvenience than a huge deal, but it can get pretty tedious trying to schedule a call with your international family and friends. Number 7, the internet sucks. If you finally do manage to get a hold of your family and friends, time zones might not be the only thing that get in the way. Because even if you schedule that Zoom call perfectly, the internet might just randomly cut out or start lagging, and by the time it's fixed, it's probably the other person's bedtime.
They've spent quite a lot of money on infrastructure for internet, actually. Since we got our internet, there's only been twice where we got upset with it. Even the guy who came to come and look at the internet when it had issues.
He fixed it. There was an issue. He fixed it and he was like, whoa, your speed is 5 times faster.
Only up to 12 megabits per second will cost you $65 a month. And don't even think about going over, or you'll have to pay an outrageous fee, and your internet speeds will slow down to 256 kilobytes per second. What developed nation has any internet speeds under 1 megabit per second? That's just ridiculous. Number 6, everything wants to kill you. If the frustratingly slow internet speeds are enough to make you want to go on a digital cleanse and take a camping trip out in the wilderness, well, don't, because literally everything here is trying to kill you. Yeah, Australia's home to box jellyfish, stonefish, tons of poisonous snakes and spiders, blue-ringed octopuses, stingrays, sharks, and the largest saltwater crocodiles in the world. Wait, did you think I was done? No, I'm just getting started. Because kangaroos, dingoes, cassowaries, emus, cone shells, and drop bears can all...
Drop bears, does that exist? Is that a thing?
Please let us know in the comments section, where does drop bears come from? Because we've heard lots of people reference drop bears and people laugh, and even we've laughed and not really known why we're laughing at it. It's funny in context, but where does that phrase actually come from?
Australia just isn't a place where you can spontaneously go for a hike or swim without being very cautious of your surroundings at all times. Heck, there's a story of a man being snatched out of his boat in a river by a giant crocodile while he was just going fishing with his family. Although don't get too worried, because you're actually more likely to die by falling off a horse.
That was one of the comments that somebody made in our last video as well. They said that you're more likely to die from a horse-related accident than actually any of the animals in Australia. I took comfort from the comments from that video, because a lot of the information you hear is that it's dangerous, it's dangerous, it's dangerous. But anywhere's dangerous if you are not doing the right things. But there's lots and lots of education around you are giving the information that you need to stay safe. Aaron
the
said
animals
we should
whose
go
homes
see
are
those.
visiting. Except for kangaroos.
Well,
You might think they're so cute and cuddly. They can be vicious, and many Australians actually see them as pests. The only reason the country hasn't declared war on them yet is because the kangaroos outnumber Australians 2-1, and the Aussies don't want a repeat of what happened in the Great Emu War of 1932. Spoiler alert, the emus won. Number 5. Bad drivers. While many Aussies try to blame the kangaroo and their lack of road sense as the reason for so many car accidents, only 7,992 kangaroo collisions actually occurred in 2019, which was less than 5% of the total automobile accidents in Australia. So maybe the drivers should start taking a little more responsibility. Now, of course, every town, city, state, and country is going to have its fair share of bad drivers, but the drivers in Australia are really some of the worst in the world.
I think there's a couple of things. I'm not going to tear him up this time.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's right or wrong, but I think one of the things that I've noticed about driving here is the roads are a lot faster than they were in the UK. Something that was 5k where we were could take us like an hour. So I feel like where we live, there was less opportunity to speed. And
Yes.
I think if you're going faster, then the likelihood of losing control and the likelihood of a fatal accident is higher because you're actually moving your vehicle as opposed to sitting in traffic and crawling.
Yeah.
So there's probably some sense in that. I don't know about how well people drive, but I also think here you pretty much have to drive. So if you've got more people doing something, then your accident numbers increase because it's like anything. Yeah, it's probably not inaccurate what you say.
In the world, and I'm not just saying this as some American trying to diss Australia, because I love Australia, and even people from Australia will admit that the drivers here are terrible. In fact, Aussies actually upload more videos of illegal and bad road behavior than any other country. Number 4. It's expensive. Aside from the aforementioned incredibly expensive internet, pretty much everything else here is expensive too. Because while Australia is big, it's still an isolated island, so a lot of things have to be shipped over long distances to get here. Of course, the cost of living varies based on location, with it generally being cheaper the farther you get from the coast and major cities, but Australia as a whole is pretty pricey. Granted, it is balanced out by the decent job pay, since Australia actually has the highest after-tax minimum wage of any country and a top 10 average income at around $64,000 US per person per year. But then again, this also just creates an expensive cycle since the high minimum wage means high production costs, which means it's cheaper to import goods, but imported goods are expensive and, well, that's just economic. Number 3. Places close early. To add on to the fact that things are expensive here, it might be difficult to even buy said things if you're working normal hours, since most shops, stores, and restaurants usually close by the time the sun sets during the week. And if they operate at all on the weekends, they're probably going to have even more limited hours.
Depending on where we are though, depends on that. Like where we're in Canberra, that's not as much of an issue. But I imagine where your mum lives in Brisbane, that would be an issue.
States where there's an abundance of 24-hour businesses. Now, to be fair, a few places do actually stay open later if you're in a big city like Sydney, Brisbane, or Melbourne, but it's hard to buy things past 5 or 6 p.m. pretty much anywhere else. Number 2. Poor mental health services. Despite their vivacious exterior, Australians usually keep their feelings to themselves. It's just not normal to talk about personal problems here, and the mental health of the nation is suffering for it. Now, there are free care options available for at-risk individuals, but since there's a shortage of psychologists, it's left many other people with no one to talk to about their problems unless they pay a lot of money out of pocket.
This is all you.
Again, this is an area that I work in, so for my personal/professional opinion, I wouldn't agree currently. And caveating that with, I work mainly with young people and vulnerable communities. I wouldn't say that people don't want to talk about their experience. I think he contradicted himself. He's saying that Aussies don't talk about their mental health. And there's a shortage of psychologists and people can't get in. But if they don't talk about that, then they don't want to get in. But I do think that my experience of working with young people specifically and people experiencing disadvantage in Canberra is that people do want to talk about their experience, but he's right, there is a shortage of psychologists. So from a perspective of the countries not taking it seriously, my experience has been there's a lot of investment in that space in comparison to my experience in the UK.
I guess the whole country to a certain degree has a skills shortage. Hence why their migration policies are quite skill orientated as well.
Hence how we came here.
1 in 5 Australians between the ages of 16 and 85 have experienced mental health illness, and over 20% of young Australians struggle with depression or anxiety. Maybe the mental health issues here actually contribute to that risk-taking, fearless reputation most Australians have earned themselves, since it's kind of the culture here to just suck up your problems and pretend you're always having a good time. Now, before we get to number 1, make sure you leave a like and subscribe, and if you'd want to see more videos about Australia or any other countries in general, let me know in the comments. But without further ado, number 1. The immigration process is very difficult. While visiting Australia is as easy as having a valid passport, filling in an online application, and paying a small fee, becoming a permanent resident is incredibly difficult for US citizens. Now, for young Americans eager to explore the world, Australia does offer a program known as the Working Holiday Visa, which allows you to live in the country for a year or two in exchange for paid work. But if you want to move here permanently, there are a lot of requirements, such as a confirmation of funds, a skill set assessment, proficiency in English, a health exam, no criminal record, and being under the age of 45. For the most part, you either have to have a lot of money saved up and plan to start a business in Australia, or offer a highly desired skill that no available Australian worker has. So while it's definitely easier to move here than to certain countries in Europe, it's still very difficult for your average American to immigrate here permanently, and that's probably why only 1,000 to 4,000 Americans do it each year. I'm sure more would if they could. But Australia is a beautiful country with amazing cities, culture, and people, so if you're willing to go through the troubles and put in the effort of moving here, you won't be disappointed.
That's a weird way to finish it, because you said these are 10 reasons for you not to move to Australia, but everything that you've said is almost kind of convincing you to move to Australia. For us, the last 5 years has been amazing.
Genuinely, I don't think it's something that's achievable for everybody.
No, it's not.
I don't.
But yeah.
I just don't. We are fortunate in a lot of areas, and I don't think it's something that's attainable to everybody because they are strict.
As he said right at the end there, it is a very arduous process. Yeah. But if you're willing to put in the work, there's gold at the end of the rainbow. We could be here forever just talking about how great it actually is here.
If there was something that we mentioned or he mentioned in the video specifically that you want us to do another sit down or reaction video to, then comment down below, because I think it'll be interesting to know what you guys would like us to talk about our experience of. And like we're saying, what we're saying isn't fact, it's like our experience. So if you want to know something specific about our experience, then let us know.
Thank you very much for watching. If you haven't already, please make sure you like the video and subscribe. Join us again on our next adventure. We'll see you on the next one.
Bye, bestie.
No problems.
It's gonna catch one day.
It will do.